Still politics, but of a different sort, casino politics. Actually, the Suffolk poll showed the level of support for a casino in South Boston under 50%, and the opposition over 40%. Joining us from No Eastie Casino, she is, of course, the head of the effort to defeat plans to put a casino on Suffolk Downs. Celeste Myers joins us. I'm Joe Heisler, your host, and in this segment, turning our gaze towards East Boston. Well, perhaps it includes the entire city, but certainly East Boston, where there's been a tremendous amount of attention, focus given to the proposal by the owners of Suffolk Downs to create a casino there as part of the state's new gaming law that would, I think by everybody's agreement, cause major changes, certainly in that neighborhood, and perhaps for the city as well. Some passionate arguments, pro and con. Tonight, joining us, one of those presenting a con argument to this. She lives there. She is the head of No Eastie Casino, a neighborhood group that sprung up in opposition to this plan. And I'm pleased to have joining me Celeste Myers. And Celeste, thanks so much for coming in. And
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So, bring us up to date.
Sure.
Of course, the state gaming law, for those that might not be paying attention, allows for one casino to be sited in roughly eastern Massachusetts, which is pretty far and wide, incidentally, but it does. And of course, there's been 3 proposals put forth. Suffolk Downs has come forward with their plan, and of course, Steve Wynn has come up with his plan for Everett, and there's also a 3rd plan apparently for Milford down near 495. But your focus, your attention has been on the Suffolk Downs plan, and of course that would need the approval of city voters or neighborhood voters. Right. What's the latest on that? Because that's been a real sore point or point of discussion, shall we say.
Sure, absolutely. So one of the huge points of discussion is East Boston or citywide only. And I guess it depends on who you talk to, but with the polls coming out, the Herald did a poll, the Globe did a poll, a couple of local universities did polls, and things are looking pretty close. So a lot of folks, including No Eastie Casino, aren't really picking a preference other than the fact that we all live in East Boston, and we're focused on East Boston, and we know that we probably have the most to lose should a casino be sited at Suffolk Downs.
Well, have you, and the debate that seems to, and there's a much larger debate, don't get me wrong, about the benefits or the negatives of a casino, but whether it is just in East Boston or citywide, who will determine that? What will determine whether that happens? And then when would that likely be if that were the case?
Sure, so the one holding all the cards right now, pun intended, I've amassed a bunch of those lately, is Mayor Menino. He decides when the vote happens, where it happens,
sole
and how it happens.
Authority to decide this.
Yes. He is advised by his host community advisory committee. It's a panel of 5 folks that have been tasked with looking into every facet of coming up with an agreement with Suffolk Downs, ideally impacts, benefits, that sort of thing. And so they've been in place for over a year now. They were officially launched in June of 2012 and have been working closely with the Suffolk Downs folks and ideally the mayor to come up with the best agreement. So
now, including the Suffolk University poll, and David Paleologos was just here, shows if the election were citywide, it'd be very close. Less than, and again, these are polls, these are snapshots, right. But showing that in the preliminary election at least, less than half would support a casino at Suffolk Downs, and more than 40% are opposed to it. Anything indicating what would happen in East Boston?
Yeah, I think what's been revealed by the polls and by the activity in East Boston is that it's less of a slam dunk than our local officials and the folks at Suffolk Downs thought it would be. They thought that there would be an obvious segment of the demographics in East Boston that they've been able to cultivate over the last 7 years, that they'd be able to kind of win over to their side, and then also citywide too. I think it's been a huge indicator. They were hoping for a greater deal of apathy, but I think the longer this has taken, it's been to our benefit. We've had the opportunity to educate folks, and I think we've seen that as opposed to what happened over in Everett, where it was essentially a 3-month discussion, and they took it by 86% of the vote. So I think that the time and the opportunity that we've had to be able to reach out to folks and educate them and to really cultivate dialogue among different groups, it's been to our benefit. And so I think it's tough to call. I think it's definitely not a given in the city, and certainly not in East Boston.
You know, I think it's fair to say Mayor Menino has made his preferences clear. He's been supportive of a casino there. How much has Steve Wynn's entry into this and the city of Everett kind of toss those cards into the air? What kind of a factor is that having? We saw in the paper just a few days ago, kind of a tete-a-tete between the mayor of Everett and Mayor Menino, kind of back and forth on this issue. But has that kind of changed the complexion, the formula of how this
I think it has. Again, I think that there are local officials and the folks at Suffolk Down were probably banking on the apathy of folks on the other side of the harbor from East Boston, but now they've been drawn into the dialogue more because the mayor and his host community advisory committee have been forced to argue the impacts to Charlestown with a casino further away from them than the folks in East Boston, and yet they're arguing the other side of the coin that it won't be impactful, but it'll all be beneficial. So it's interesting. I think it's getting people thinking a little bit more. Can't be both, right? Either casinos have an impact or they don't have an impact, and we should be having the same consideration for East Boston as we do for Charlestown.
How about your organization? Of course, you're obviously opposed to the casino at Suffolk Downs. Would you? If the State Gaming Commission picked the Everett proposal, well, it's your backyard, but not in your front yard.
Sure.
Is that to kind of change how you approach this and your tactics?
It really doesn't, personally for me, and I'll describe and characterize my organization that has a core group of about 25 people and then hundreds more of volunteers and, hundreds more of supporters. And I think we all kind of fall somewhere in the spectrum of opposition. Some of us clearly NIMBYs, and, the East Boston backyard is one they're most concerned with, and some don't really like the idea of gaming at all. My own perspective has always been that a casino in East Boston or even on the East Coast is going to have negative impacts to my neighborhood, my city, and the Commonwealth. Naturally, no matter how you feel about casinos, in general, as a business, if people like to go visit them, you can't underestimate and deny the fact that they are here to take a lot of money. They garner a lot of interest, they attract a lot of patrons, and in any form of business, you don't set down one brick, one drop of mortar unless you stand to take away a lot of money. Being positioned right next to Logan Airport, which is the entryway to our state, which is the gauntlet that every tourist dollar has to travel, I would be very nervous if I relied on one single of those, one single tourist dollar. So my personal position is that it's not ideal for East Boston, naturally. That's why I started this fight. And having it sited in Everett is the difference from being ground zero of a blast site and being a few miles away.
Right.
Maybe you stand a slight better chance of surviving, but I still think it's a bad deal.
Just lose your hair. You won't
Get a little bit
die
singed.
From the blast
Right.
Do you gamble?
I have gambled, and I joke all the time that I've had to say no to more girls' weekends. And when I first started, really, one of my girlfriends had a great deal, Vegas, $500, but I couldn't go. But in all sincerity, when I first started looking into this way back in 2010, I was concerned about traffic and crime and just overload to the local infrastructure and just from a common sense perspective. As we've begun to dig into it more and see how the casino industry operates and see how it doesn't really care about what happens as a result of the industry, and to see how our local officials and even the Gaming Commission has kind of operated and managed this process, I'm turned off more and more every day. I don't see myself in the near future, going to a casino or gambling or that sort of thing.
Did you vote for Mayor Menino?
I worked on his campaign.
Oh, wow.
I ran his phone banks in East Boston when he ran against Flaherty. I've worked with my state rep, who's, credited as being a key architect with the casino bill. So back in 2010, when it seemed like it was more of an inevitability that the bill would be passed, the legislature, I called him up, texted him. Hey, look into this, push for an independent cost-benefit analysis, push for a vote at the statewide level. And when the response I got was pretty much, don't worry about it, pretty much mind your business, we got it handled, that's when things started to percolate.
Feel different about him now?
I feel different about his point of view around the casino issue. And I have worked in a number of campaigns since 2007, worked very ardently around the clock for some of my legislators and representatives, but my home, my community, my neighbors, my family, my backyard is much more important to me than being in lockstep with any political official.
Well, talking about that, of course, the mayor is leaving, and what once was seen as, I think, kind of a slam dunk by Suffolk Downs has become more and more in question. And perhaps if it goes beyond the mayor's term, who knows? I'm kind of curious about that, the impact that this is having now in the mayor's race.
Sure.
Now, I saw, of course, Dan Conley, and he touted it here when he was here, said, he was not Mayor Menino's flunky or a boy following him, that he wanted a citywide vote. And are you seeing that impact? Are you feeling it amongst other candidates? Is there some...
Well, it's interesting, right? So when we look at candidates that have kind of approached this outside of the box and thought about it a little bit critically and intelligently, there are two, right? Walzak recently and Conley have, kind of broken.
From the
Yeah, absolutely. And the others kind of see it as a bullet to dodge. If it's a conversation they don't have to have, then they don't. And I'm very friendly with a number of them. But that's concerning to me, and it should be an indicator to anyone in any community in East Boston. We all have our issues that are near and dear to us. East Boston right now, it's the casino, and it's the fuel issue with Global Oil wanting to bring in the ethanol. Those are the two big issues. And if a candidate's tactic is to dance around the issue and not address the most important issue to a community, how will that manifest in their term in City Hall?
Well, and there's no candidate from East Boston, so certainly it's in play, and it always has traditionally been a fairly high voting precinct.
Right, and usually our elected officials are pretty much in lockstep, which means to say the city councilor and the state rep and the senator are usually on the same page. Not so much. I live on a street where, right up the corner, there are two different headquarters for two different candidates, and folks that are typically working all on the same page in concert, we're all kind of passing each other. So it's interesting to see, and I think candidates that don't have a strong kind of anchor in East Boston and didn't previously have a presence, they can definitely distinguish themselves by coming out against the casino, or at least thinking critically and having a critical approach about how they will handle this, because there's a very good chance that this will be settled before Menino leaves office.
And how about city councilors running for re-election? Of course, at large, there's just two of the four incumbents remaining.
Yes.
They're running for re-election. Steve Murphy, Ayanna Presley. Ultimately, if I understand this correctly, city council, while the mayor will make a recommendation, the city council has to kind of give approval to it. Is that correct?
Well, right, and that was my understanding as well. And so we were naturally very disappointed that City Council did not take, a critical point of view with the casino issue.
There no vote being taken on it, or?
Very early on, I think in 2012, Steve Murphy attempted to launch a subcommittee to look into casino impacts, and that was very quickly dismissed. And I met with Steve Murphy along with a couple of my co-committee members early on, and we didn't get a lot of traction there. you know, and his perspective pretty much was to kind of see what the Suffolk Downs folks are proposing. Now, if we all followed their lead, we would be at this juncture. There would have been no dialogue. It would have been 2 years later, and we'd been waiting for the mayor to release the agreement and then flip the switch on 2 months to investigate, share, disclose, all of that. And we haven't been able to get there in over a year and a half.
Well, neighborhood referendum or citywide referendum, are you prepared? Are you ready? Of course, they have to. There has to be some vote taken by December 31st.
By December 31st, the applications need to be filed. The applications are multiple parts, including an affirmative vote in the referendum.
Are you ready for a campaign? Let's see. This might be the ultimate David versus
Sure,
Goliath.
and we are running a campaign. Slow but steady, we're running a campaign. We are an official ballot question committee. We organized officially with City Hall in June of 2012. We've been, you know, calling our neighbors, reaching out, pounding on doors, doing some visibilities here and there. There are some key pieces of information that we're missing. You know, we're missing, you know, impact studies, which we requested, which, according to language in the bill, the developers have to fund those and provide data. We haven't received those. The highest level, the whole Suffolk Downs campaign is run on jobs and opportunity. They keep it at the 50-foot view. They're describing 4,000 jobs to locals, although the other side of that coin is they can't promise any specific number of jobs to East Bostonians.
If you don't get that information, could you file a legal challenge? Could we see the referendum process even delayed?
Sure, well, we do have some volunteer attorneys working on our team, but not so much that we would be able to afford to sue, quite frankly. Yeah. So if any benefactors want to step forward and launch a suit on our behalf, that would be great. But I think, you know, look, we've been, had a few insults levied at us, and a lot of people try to discredit us for, you know, having dubious reasons for wanting to stop a casino. And ultimately, it's because we want to live here, work here, raise our families, be successful here, whatever that means for each of us. And in order to do that, we need to be able to have as much information as possible to make critical decisions. You know, I do come from a place of no, as do all of my committee members, but when challenged by someone who is pro-casino, I always remind them, then get your information. Find out how you get your opportunity. Find out how you get one of these $42,000 a year jobs. Because I tell them, I've worked in the hospitality industry for 25 years myself. I've yet to net a $42,000 pay year working 40 hours. Most cocktail waitresses are $250 an hour. I bet that's not going to happen either. So, you know, you know, people remind us that people have free choice, but it's only free choice if you have all the information you need to make that choice and that decision.
Again, the group is called No Eastie Casino. My guest tonight, Celeste Myers, who's helping to head up that organization. By December 31st, we should see a vote. Whether it's only in East Boston or citywide, I think has still yet to be determined. And if people want to find out more information about your organization, you have a website?
We are. We're noeastiecasino.com, more easily accessible rather, at Facebook under No Eastie Casino, and our email is noeastiecasino@gmail.com, so we're pretty easy to find.
Well, we appreciate you coming in.
Thank you so much for having me.
Will you come back as we get
Absolutely.
closer to the
Anytime, anytime.
Again, Celeste Myers, she's one of those heading up the organization No Eastie Casino, a very interesting issue that could have an impact in the mayor's race and beyond. Unfortunately, we're out of time for tonight. You're watching Talking the Neighborhoods on the Boston Neighborhood Network. We're here tonight and every Monday night. We'll be back next week at the same time. Our guests, Representative Martin Walsh and Suffolk DA Dan Connolly, both candidates for mayor. Until then, for the entire staff and crew here at BNN TV, want to thank you for watching. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.